This is Dr. Bev Knox, and you are listening to my psychology tutorials, Learn Psychology While You Sleep. We are on Module 13G, Sexual Development Variations in the Nature of Gender. Sometimes nature blurs the biological line between males and females. When a fetus is exposed to unusual levels of sex hormones or is especially sensitive to those hormones, the individual may develop a disorder of sexual development with chromosomes or autonomy not typical male or female. A genetic male may be born with normal male hormones and testes, but no penis or a very small one. Bottom line here, according to the National Academy of Sciences, sex matters. Sex-related genes and physiology result in behavioral and cognitive differences between males and females. How do gender roles and gender identity differ? For many people, biological sex and gender coexist in harmony. Biology draws the outline and culture paints the details. The physical traits that define us as biological males or females are the same worldwide, but the gender traits that define how men or boys and women or girls should act, interact, or feel about themselves may differ from one place to another. Let's talk about gender roles. First, a role is a set of expectations or norms about a social position, defining how those in the position ought to behave. So, a role is a set of expectation or norms about a social position, defining how those in the position ought to behave. Now, gender role, and I'm going over these definitions because you have to be able to identify the definition of each term as stated. Gender role is a set of expectations or behaviors, attitudes, and traits for males or for females. Gender role is a set of expected behaviors, attitudes, and traits for males or for females. Gender identity is our sense of being male, female, or a combination of the two. Gender identity, our sense of being male, female, or a combination of the two. Gender typing, the acquisition of a traditional masculine or feminine role. Gender typing, the acquisition of a traditional masculine or feminine role. Transgender, an umbrella term describing people whose gender identity or expression differs from that associated with their birth sex. Transgender is an umbrella term describing people whose gender identity or expression differs from that associated with their birth sex. Now let's get back to gender roles. Cultures shape our behaviors by defining how we ought to behave in a particular social position or role. We can see this shape and power of gender roles, the social expectation that guides our behavior as men and women. Gender roles shift over time, and that is something we have to understand. Gender roles do not stay the same or are not constant over time. They do shift as we evolve as a society. A century ago, North American women could not vote in national elections, serve in the military, or divorce a husband without cause. And if a woman worked for pay outside the home, she would more likely have been a midwife or a seamstress rather than a surgeon or a fashion designer. Gender roles can change dramatically in a thin slice of history. At the beginning of the 20th century, only one country in the world, New Zealand, granted women the right to vote. Today, worldwide, only Saudi Arabia denies women the right to vote. And this was cited in 2011. More United States women than men now graduate from college, and nearly half of the workforce is female. Gender roles also may vary from one place to another. Nomadic societies of food gathering people have had little division of labor by sex. How do we learn gender? A gender role describes how others expect us to think, feel, and act. Our gender identity is our own personal sense of being male, female, or a combination of the two. How do we develop that personal viewpoint? Well, social learning theory assumes that we acquire our gender identity in childhood. Some critics think there's more gender identity than imitating parents and being repeatedly rewarded for certain responses. They point out that gender typing, taking the traditional male or female role, varies from child to child. No matter how much parents encourage or discourage traditional gender behavior, children may drift towards what feels right to them. How we feel matters, but so does how we think. Early in life, we form schemas or concepts that help us make sense of the world. Our gender schemas organize our differences of male-female characteristics and help us think about our gender identity, about who we are. In one analysis of 43 studies, parents with traditional gender schemas were more likely to have gender-typed children who share their culture's expectations about how males and females should act. As a young child, you, like other children, were a gender detective. Before your first birthday, you knew the difference between male and female voice or face. After you turned 2, language forced you to label the world in terms of gender. If you were an English speaker, you learned to classify people as he or she. If you were a French speaker, you learned also to classify objects as masculine or feminine. For a transgender person, comparing one's personal gender identity with cultural concepts of gender roles produces feelings of confusion and discord. A transgender person's gender identity differs from the behaviors or traits considered typical for that person's birth sex. A person who was born a female may feel he is a man living in a woman's body, or a person born male may feel she is a woman living in a man's body. Some transgender people are also transsexual. They prefer to live as members of the other birth sex. Some transsexual people, about 3 times as many men as women, may seek medical treatment, including sex reassignment surgery, to achieve their preferred gender identity. Please note that gender identity is distinct from sexual orientation, which is the direct of one's sexual attraction. Transgendered people may be sexually attracted to people of the opposite birth sex, heterosexual, the same birth sex, homosexual, and both sexes, bisexual, or to no one at all, asexual. The unique gene combination created when our mother's egg engulfed our father's sperm predisposed both our shared humanity and our individual differences. Our genes form us. This is a great truth about human nature. But our experiences also shape us. If their genes and hormones predispose males to be more physically aggressive than females, culture can amplify this gender difference through norms that shower benefits on macho men and gentle women. In many modern cultures, gender roles are merging. Brute strength is becoming increasingly less important for power and status. From 1960 into the next century, women scored from 6% to nearly 50% of U.S. medical school graduates. We can't excuse our failings by blaming them solely on bad genes or bad influences, however. In reality, we are both the creatures and the creators of our worlds. So many things about us, including our gender identity and our mating behaviors, are the products of our genes and environments. Our decisions today design our environments tomorrow. Mind matters. This is Dr. Bev Knox, and you are listening to my psychology tutorials, Learn Psychology While You Sleep.